Hello everyone out there. Once again, I am Nursky, going to be coming to you guys on behalf of modsonline.com. And today we're going to be talking patch 1.3.5 patch notes. And additionally, we're going to be talking about Season 3 Starcraft 2 ladder. Because yes, it's a Starcraft 2 season ladder reset. Once again today on July 26th. So we're going to have a little bit more of a relaxed episode today. We're going to take an easy, more chilled out approach to things. Not going to be casting a game in this particular video. I'm going to be doing a game video of some games played on the new maps, probably a little bit later today. But for now, we're going to get up this video of just going over the patch notes. And we're going to go over the Season 3 and the Season 3 ladder maps and everything you could possibly need to know. So as you can see on the screen already, we do have the patch 1.3.5 patch notes, and I'm going to be honest, normally when I do these patch notes videos, I get into the test map, I would show you all the different changes to the units and stuff, but I'm going to be honest, there's not a whole lot here as far as game goes. There's no balance changes in this patch. It's more of a facelift than anything else. The biggest change obviously being that Latin American players will be playing with North American players. Taiwanese players will be playing with the Southeast Asian players, or actually not the SEA players. They'll be playing with the Korean players, which is big for people trying to get onto the Korean server because you need to be like a resident of Korea or whatever in order to actually play on the Korean server. But there's like these loopholes you can get through that I'm not going to explain because I don't know if any of them are even legal through the Taiwanese ladder. So there's some people raving about that. And then I do also believe the Russian server is being added to the EU server, is what I want to say. So I believe that is being added together. So that's probably the biggest change. North American players won't really notice. There's about, give or take, 500,000 active North American players as of last season. According to SC2 ranks, and there was like 50,000 Latin American players, so you're talking like a tenth of the amount of players being added. So like I don't foresee it being super noticeable. Like it'll be a little noticeable. You might find yourself playing a little bit easier, a few more games, especially at the higher levels. But I think overall the Latin American adding to North America will be far less noticeable compared to like the Taiwanese, like around 100,000 getting added to the Korean, which was only around like 300,000 or something like that, or the Russian servers getting added to the EU servers, because all those populations are far, far, far lower than the North American populations. So of course that's it for the patch notes. Moving on to Season 3 beginning. Yes, because this is the part we care about. Season 3 launch. Ladders are now reset. We are going to be having a new set of map pool, and just to specifically look at that, here is Blizzard's post on the new map pool. Removed is Scrap Station, Slag Pits, Delta Quadrant, and Metalopolis. We're going to talk more about Metalopolis in 1 second. Carried over, Antigua Caverns, the map that just won't go away, Backwater Gulch, Shakir's Plateau, Tal'Darim, Shattered Temple, Typhoon Peaks, and then of course the new additions is going to be Nerazim Crypt, Scorching Crater, Antigua Shipyard, and Bissell Caverns. And there's also some 2v2 and 3v3 map changes. I'm going to be honest, along with some 4v4 map changes, I don't pay much attention to them. Typically Blizzard's maps for 2v2, 3v3, and 4v4, like, or even free-for-all, they're okay maps and stuff. They might not be bad for 2v2 or 3v3 or 4v4, but in general, those team matchups are so goofy with the way the Blizzard system works. Like, you have pre-made teams playing against non-pre-made teams and stuff like that. And it just ends up being kind of, I don't know, pointless to really look at those ladders as serious. I've made 2v2, 3v3, 4v4 masters quite easily in the past, so I don't really see it as a big deal of the game. 1v1 is a much more competitive environment. And then finally, last but not least, going back to that Metalopolis mention of that being removed, they actually ended up posting a huge explanation as to why Metalopolis got removed. So basically what this post here summates to is that they are now going to be, after a year of the game, deciding that now we need to look at close positions and decide if they're balanced. So they're going to be examining close positions now. So that's one reason Metalopolis was removed. So of course a lot of you would be going, well, what about Shadow Temple? It's got close spawns. Why didn't they remove Shadow Temple? Well, they added an additional addendum onto this, saying that on top of that, they're saying that Metalopolis has had a heavy 60% plus bias towards Zerg at the highest levels of play. Okay, I don't know if that means on their ladder, in tournaments, because tournaments, the only ones that I can think of that still use Metalopolis is MLG, and you can't spawn in close positions. So I'm not, like, it seemed a little, like, fuzzy as to what high levels of play meant for that 60% win margin for Zerg. Because overall, I've always thought that some of the best matches come on maps like MLG and Metalopolis. But to each their own, whatever. They've got their reasons. They're using their stats off the ladder, which is kind of like a guy using a Lexus car manual to fix a Ford truck. But, you know, that's alright. We'll let Blizzard do as they do, and hopefully eventually they'll get all this stuff balanced as far as game balance goes, and we'll have this great game like we used to have with Brood War. Here's to hoping. But, regardless of that, now we're going to actually take a second. We're going to look at these new maps, because that is what is really what a lot of people are going to want to see. And since we don't have any patch notes to talk about, we're going to talk about the maps instead. So I have done some replays of these new maps. So the first one we're going to be looking at here, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, is going to be Bissell Caverns. A little bit of the replay for you guys really quick. We're going to take a look at these new maps. We're not going to do like some super heavy analysis on these maps. Just going to be blazing through these replays. I used my, just spawned as random and then spread probes all over the map and pylons and stuff like that, so that we could get a good, nice view of the map, get all the fog of war out of the way. So I'm just going to be zipping through these replays, and we're going to talk about these maps as soon as they pause. Alright, so here we go. Map number 1, which is going to be Bissell Caverns. I think it's important to note that this is a medium-sized map. This is not actually a small-sized map. So a lot of Blizzard maps, especially in the ladder pool, are small-sized map. This is a medium-sized map, which does actually make a lot of the distances quite a bit different compared to what they would be otherwise. So as you can see right now, you see I'm spawning right here. Here's my main. The other possible mains on this map are in this location over here, where I got this pylon. Then we have another one down over here, and another one down over here. So from the position that I spawned, the close air would be this position down here. The close ground would be this position over here. Although I'd have to argue that I think the close air is also the close ground on this map. And then of course the cross positions would be this position down over here in this bottom right hand corner, as you can see on the minimap. So first we're going to just examine the main. You can see that this is a very large main area. There is much similar, I'd say, in some ways to Metalopolis. That is now gone. Quite a bit of open area in the back of your main. So there's a lot of room for stuff like overlords, drops, warp prisms to potentially get into the back of your main. This map also has kind of like a cliff type area just outside the main that kind of wraps around what is a fairly close gold expansion with some rocks. So that's one thing to note. But as you can see, as we come out of the main, we're going to zip down the ramp here. And you do have your natural here. The natural, from an air perspective, is fairly exposed. You can see there's a lot of air, open airspace around your natural expansion, so that could definitely come to play on this map. You got a pretty tight choke over here at the front. I could see a lot of Terran and Protoss players maybe trying to see if they could get away with a Forge expansion or a really fast 3 racks on this map, especially just because this is not the biggest amount of distance to actually cover, especially with really good building placement. So that could definitely be a possibility on this map. Moving out of the natural, and we're going to get onto the map, you can see that you can either, for third bases, depending on your spawn positions, whether you're in the close air or the close ground is what I'm going to call it, or the cross positions. If you're close ground, obviously this base is not going to really be a potential good candidate for a third base. And if you are also close ground, your opponent actually can't get straight directly to you from your ramp to their ramp. They can actually get to you, but their shortest distance is actually blocked by some destructible rocks. So Blizzard's been trying to get more creative with their destructible rocks and create new ways to slow each other down. But they can still actually bypass those rocks by just going through this low area dip. So in some ways this map's general layout's a little reminiscent of Metalopolis, which is actually out of the map pool, but with larger distances. And a depressed base in between your bases rather than a raised base. So you can see though that you do have to go around, so you do have to go through the middle, which would be unlikely, or just go down this depressed area where there is some chokes now that people can try and take advantage of. So in these close ground positions, I think most likely your third would be these gold bases. There is 2 of them. So if you are ever in the close ground or cross positions, each player will have a gold base available to them. Is a good amount of minerals at these gold bases, as you can see. Do have 6 mineral patches and 2 Vespian geysers at these expansions. Do have some destructible rocks in the way, so you have to clear those out, but such is life on a Blizzard map. As far as the close air positions go, obviously in a lot of matchups you're not going to see a lot of people taking these gold bases, or they'll be fighting over who can take the far gold base. So that's going to make this base down here much more likely, which I kind of do like that in the either close air or the cross positions. There's actually quite a few bases available to you that are somewhat defendable just from the standpoint of the map architecture. I mean, you take this as your main, take this base as your natural. If you're going to take a third for some reason, you can take this base, and yes, your opponent can attack into you from this ramp, but it's a small choke. But as long as these destructible rocks are up, the only other possible attack path is this choke right here. So you can actually control a lot of space just from this area in here as far as your third and your natural and main goes. But that air space around the edges of your main are going to probably come into factor a lot, especially against Terrans, who tend to do a lot of drops, against Zerg doing a lot of Mutalisk type of play, or against Protoss trying to do some funky Warp Prism stuff. There is just one Xel'Naga tower in the middle of this map, so we'll get to this part last here. Can see it does cover the entire distance of the center areas to move through the map, so this would probably play out the largest, I'd assume, in the cross positions, because obviously that's going to be your shortest distance to your opponent. So this Xel'Naga tower would be pretty essential to hold it for a lot of reasons, because otherwise you got to knock down these rocks before you can really bypass it successfully without really going out of your way down these depressions. So that's going to be it for the first map. We're going to be moving on to the next map. I'm going to show you guys, give you a little tour around the next map, which is going to be Antigua Shipyard. Now that first map was considered one of their normal maps. It's not a macro map, it's not a rush map. This map is considered their macro map. Now, I think it's important to note that while that last map was medium in size, this map is actually small in size. But don't let that mislead you, because just because of the map size, the actual size of the map box that they build the map on, it doesn't always necessarily equate to how the map's really going to play out and your ability to macro or rush on the map. So we can see now we are on the map Antigua Shipyard. There's 4 spawn locations. There's actually 4 spawn locations on all 4 of the new maps. So you have where I spawned here as your first potential main. Then you have another one over yonder where this pylon is forming. That is one of the other mains. Then you have another one over here in this corner. And then finally one over here in this corner. So the mains aren't really symmetrically laid out on this map. It's more of a rotational symmetry instead of an actual asymmetrical map. So for instance, if I am spawning where I am at in this main, as you can see, there's this goofy little ledge on this map. I have to point that out as we talk about the main. I'm not really sure what the point of this little ledge is, but it's like this new thing that Blizzard's doing where they have these tiny ledges next to your main. So I don't know, I mean, you can avoid it as far as your building placement goes, so I don't think it'll be a big deal. But anyways, so you move down into your natural here. And you can see right here from this main, my natural straight down here. Now if I was spawning to the opponent that I would call in a, I guess, close air-ish type position, which would be the opponent over here. If you see, he comes out of his main and down, and his natural is actually towards my base. So that's what I'm talking about by this map has rotational symmetry, but not, but isn't asymmetrical. It's not like a block where everything perfectly lines up and everything's the same distances no matter where you spawn. Depending on where you spawn on this map will actually have to greatly affect how you think about your game. Just from the standpoint of, if I'm spawning here, well, if my opponent's over here, now as far as air distances go, I have a pretty close air distance to his main compared to his air distance to me, because my natural and potentially even my third is going to be really close to his main, unless of course I take a third somewhere else on the map. Whereas if I'm in like what I guess would be considered a pseudo close airish close ground position, these positions on these rotational symmetry maps are a little goofy. My main is quite close to his natural by air, and his main, he's got to expand towards me, so his natural's a lot more exposed, but my main's a little more exposed to him, especially from this cliff area. So it'll definitely be interesting how it plays out, but on top of that though, his third, most natural third, the easiest third for him to take, where as soon as he comes out of his natural and turns right, hey, a third, that's going to be a lot harder for him to take, because that's super close by air for me. So if I'm a Zerg playing a Protoss, or if I'm a Terran playing a Zerg or a Protoss, it's really easy for me to drop Muta Harass, Warp Prism Harass, this third base. Which means he's going to have to take a third base that's a little bit harder for him to defend by ground, because this area covers your natural, or from the perspective of my main, this area covers your natural, and would naturally cover your third, because there is some destructible debris blocking this other ramp for at least a while until they could get rid of that debris. But if you have to take this base over here as your third, you now can see that the ground distance to where your army would be placed is quite a bit larger. So depending on how you spawn could really affect how you're going to have to play out this map. If you're in a spawn position on this map where you, I would say, like either these two spawn positions, for instance, it's going to be great for this player because you got 3 nice defendable bases, but for this player, now you've got to really think about, well, maybe I need to do something off of 2 bases, because my third is going to be really hard for me to defend. Either I'm going to be really exposed to ground if I take this third, or, you know, try and hide a base somewhere, or potentially I'm going to be quite a bit exposed if I take this base. Now, you could potentially, theoretically, in these positions, maybe, especially for Terran players, have an advantage of, well, this is great because by ground, if I plop a planetary fortress on this gold, it's on the attack path to his main, second, and third. So for Terran players, this could actually end up working out in your advantage, because now you might have a great gold base you could take. But for the Protoss and Zerg players, now you're going to have to start thinking more about 2-basing harder, because you're not going to be able to expand towards a Terran player necessarily, or another Protoss player, or another Zerg player quite as easily. So you might have to think of a more 2-base-based strategy, rather than going for a really heavy 3-base type strategy. So it's really going to depend on your matchup and stuff, and where you end up spawning the map. So definitely where you spawn this map is going to greatly affect how you think about playing on this map. There's only one Xel'Naga tower in the center of this map. It's a raised Xel'Naga tower, so that could definitely play into things, because controlling the Xel'Naga tower essentially means you control these 2 gold bases that are to the north and south ends of the map, and there is only just these 2 gold bases. There is a lot of expansions. No destructible rocks anywhere on this map as far as blocking bases go. The only place there is actually destructible rocks is at these thirds for each of the players. There's a double ramp, there's a small ramp, and then a larger ramp with the destructible debris by it. So that's the only place you actually have to think about destructible debris, rocks, or whatnot. All the bases are very open. That's why they consider it their macro map, because there's a lot of very easy to take bases. All the bases in this map, much like the last map, are very exposed to air. So stuff like drops, Muta Harass, Warp Prism Harassment, Phoenixes, Void Rays, all that good fun. Could definitely be a very good choice in this map as well as the first map. But that's going to be about it. I definitely would say on this map you want to control this center area, because then you control the golds. Be aware of your spawns on this map, because they could definitely affect a lot of the ways you want to do your strategy on this map. So now off we go to the land of map number 3. Nerazim Crypt. This is a small map once again. This was also considered one of their normal maps. We're going to be getting to the Rush map last, and I have a lot to say about that map. I think overall, for the most part, most of these maps seem like they'll be decent. Definitely huge improvements over Delta Quadrant, Scrap Station. Both those maps had huge issues with the map pool. Obviously, a lot of people are going to still miss Metalopolis. No one's going to really miss Slag Pit. Slag Pits was just littered with issues. Almost all players hated Slag Pits. A lot of Protoss and Terran didn't like Slag Pits because it was really hard for them to take a gold, but like against Zerg, Zergs a lot of time could abuse their mobility and take a gold where the Terran and Protoss player couldn't. So anyways, here we go. Nerazim Crypt. So here's our main. You do have 4 spawn locations. This is an asymmetrical map, as you can see, because we do have all 4 starting points in the 4 corners of the map. Well, it's asymmetrical map, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about how the spawn locations balance out in a second. So as you can see, pretty decent sized main. Once again, a lot of air exposure. This seems to be a common theme on all 4 of these maps. There's quite a bit of air exposure to the mains. Quite a bit of places to hide overlords, hide warp prisms, get medevacs, banshees, void rays, all that fun into your opponent's base. So that could once again be a good strategy on this map. Go down to natural. We can't see it on this map. You do have a fairly choked off natural, partially choked off by destructible rocks. So this is kind of reminiscent of GSL's Crevasse, where they changed the main ramp with a couple of destructible rocks. So on this map, they try and actually change the choke into your natural. So having these rocks up actually could allow you to use like a 3 barracks wall off, or maybe even forge expand on this map. Plus you also have this additional shrubbery right here, which would make it a lot harder to assault this front of the base. And it's, like I said, pretty choked off, but also very exposed to air is the natural along with the main, so that's going to be interesting play. As we can see in what I would guess I would consider the close air distances to be these top 2 positions, or bottom 2 I should say, and then these top 2. Close ground would seem to be the vertical positions, and of course cross as always. There is 4 Zalaga towers on this map, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Another interesting aspect actually on this map, and it's uniquely on this map, is the way these bases lay out is kind of interesting, I would say. If you do come out of your main, take your natural, in like, for instance, these bottom horizontal positions, when you come around, this would probably be a very likely to take 3rd, pretty defendable. For your opponent, this map, while having asymmetrical starting positions, the actual naturals are more rotationally symmetrical, if that makes sense, in the sense that the natural from this position to this position is actually towards your opponent, and your natural for this guy towards this guy is actually away from the opponent, and then he's going to have a much easier to take 3rd than you are, because now we have that same issue that I was just talking about on the last map, which had just pure rotational symmetry. Which is that you're going to have to probably take a 3rd that's harder to defend by ground, so makes it a little bit harder for you. But there is enough distance between these mains that, I mean, you still, in theory, could take this base. You're just going to be very susceptible from drops, meter harass, stuff like that, from the main of the other player if you do get bold and take this base. No gold bases on this map anywhere, though. Everything's a blue base. No destructible rocks stopping you from taking any of the expansions, though, so that's kind of an interesting feature that they have done away with a lot of destructible rocks on this map. But definitely going to see a lot of 2-3 base play, I would say, on this map in a lot of the spawn positions. I think cross positions, you definitely could end up getting 4 or 5 base play where you get the map essentially split in half right down the center. So that could definitely be a real possibility. Where basically the naturals and 3rds for the other bases would end up becoming your 5ths and whatnot, but might actually be difficult to take the mains of some of the positions. So this map should play out interestingly enough. There's a lot of open air area on this map, so that's definitely going to play into it quite a bit. lots of ledges and stuff you can maybe try and abuse depending on your spawning positions on this map. So overall, though, I think the map's decent. As I said, it does have rotational symmetry issues, even though the spawn locations are asymmetrical as far as the naturals go. So you're definitely going to have to take spawn positions into consideration on this map as well. Moving on to the last map. Scorching Crater. Being totally honest, as this map loads up and we get the replay going, this is probably, personally speaking, my least favorite map of the map pool. But that's because I'm not the type of player who likes to one base really hard against my opponent. And some people are going to be going, what do you mean? And this map was labeled as Blizzard's Rush Map. And what I mean by Rush Map is, if you look at the distances on this map, they are ridiculously short. They are almost ridiculous to the point of being steps of war short. You go out of your base, and all 4 bases, mains, have these huge ramps here. As you follow me out of, here's the main, and as you can see, we do have that air exposure once again around the edges of the base. Even like, what was that map? Antigua Shipyard. We got this extra ledge here where your opponent can maybe like drop siege tanks on the low ground and then try and get marines into your base or something. I don't really get the point to these, but whatever. You go down your main ramp, which is kind of a goofy ramp, to be totally honest, because it's like a 3-tiered dealy here. So like you get this kind of goofy, really little narrow ramp down from your main, and you have your natural here, and your natural's kind of funky because you got this like big area here, but then for like no reason at all to like just create a choke, they're like, let's just throw some terrain smack dab in the middle of the natural so that it's not this huge giant like second main area. So that's what they did, but then they put a ramp off to the side that your opponent can get off of, a large ramp, and another huge ramp on the front of your base, and then you have like 2 chokes in towards your natural and your main that you have to deal with. Your third is defended by destructible rocks. Hip hip hooray for you. But there's also a ledge that can actually, like with a siege tank, Broodlord, Colossus, whatever, if they drop something up here, they can actually destroy your third base there. So the natural seems like defendable-ish. But yeah, you're going to have to definitely place buildings very specifically because you have 2 chokes to take care of if you're going to actually expand fairly quickly to your natural. But going back to those rush distances I was talking about, all 4 ramps for the mains lead right into the center area. So really, to get out of your main and towards your opponent, it's going to basically be crucial that if you're going to play on this map that you control this middle Xel'Naga tower, because it's basically going to give you all the information of what your opponent's doing. As I did say, there's some pretty decent amount of exposed airspace around. There's even this extra areas over here. There is gold bases on this map, and like the gold bases are kind of interesting on this map. I'd say there's just 2 of them. They're in the center of the map, as you can see. Everything else is just a regular blue base, normal base. So you got 2 gold bases in the center of the map. I'm gonna be honest with the rush distances on this map. Unless 2 players are really just crashing heads together and not getting a lot done, I can't see the gold bases getting used a ton unless you're like just trying to finish off your opponent. Just because they're pretty exposed in a way. There's multiple directions people can come in your base. I mean, you go through these grassy areas, and then they can get to your gold base. But in the cross positions on this map, that might be the one time you could get a pretty decent game out of it, because the rush distances in the cross positions are the largest that they get on this map. All of the positions either below you or to the horizontal of you directly, so I guess close air and close ground, they can get to your base really fast. There's some nice ramps basically straight off, and around you go, and bam, I'm in your base. So as you can see, it's not a far distance in any way, shape, or form from this mains ramp down to your mains ramp. And that's exactly why they call it the rush map, because this is like steps of war style distances from main to main. And that's even the case if you zip over here to this main. As you can see, it doesn't take me any time at all to move the mouse cursor over here to this other main. Cross positioners have the largest distance. I'd say it's like almost true steps of war distance. But that's about it. Every other position, it's going to be a pretty fast map. So these gold bases and all these extra bases around here are kind of interesting. I would say in most positions, your third is fairly easy to defend, minus like drops and stuff like that maybe harassing you. But I just question how much you'd really typically get up on 3 bases. So I could see a lot of turtling on this map in the early game if you're not going to rush your opponent. Definitely going to be a good option to like maybe turtle and harass a little bit, because you do have some decent choke points where you can defend your main, natural, and third, especially with these destructible rocks aiding you. But you're going to have a little bit of a hard time, I would say, if they really blitz you holding it, if you go real macro-oriented. So people are definitely, if you're going to play on this map, have to use aggressive strategies. You're going to have to go tit for tat with your opponent, because if you get real macro-heavy or greedy on this map, I think you're going to have a real hard time surviving. So that's it for the new map pool, guys. I'm going to quit out of this replay. That's going to be it for this patch 1.3.5 plus Season 3 Ladders maps video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to Mods Online YouTube. And for Mods Online, I am Nursky, and I'm going to be saying peace easy for now, guys. I will see you guys at my next cast.